Welcome to the EdTech Throwdown. Join us, Eric Geis and Nick Johnson, as we dive into today's best EdTech tools, tips, and practices. We do the research so you can teach your class. Remember to follow us on social media like Instagram, X, or Facebook by looking for the handle at EdTech Throwdown. Now please enjoy the show.
Welcome to the EdTech Throwdown. This is episode 170 called Back to School and Refreshing Your EdTech Mindset. In this episode, we'll talk about how we are preparing to wrap up summer and get ready for the start of the school year. An important part of this is the refreshing of our EdTech mindsets. Listen in to learn how we're doing it. This is another episode you don't want to miss. Check it out.
All right, so this is our first recording in quite some time. We had a couple episodes banked. We usually do that when we go away for summer break, just so I know I like to just get away from technology a little bit, get away from social media and all that stuff. And I've done a pretty good job of it this summer. I mean, if you go check any socials, anything that was out there was basically something that I queued up before we left. And I, just took a step back and just got refreshed and just enjoyed time with my kids and being outdoors and things like that. So this one's going to be interesting. We'll see if we still got it or if we're a little rusty. I don't know how it's going to go, but I have a feeling it's going to be a great one because this is an episode that we do each year with opening day activities and the EdTech mindset and things like that. So Nick, how's your summer going?
It's going great. I'll echo a lot of the stuff you just said. The time off was certainly nice, still is nice from school. Little time off away from technology has been really nice. I love doing the podcasts with you here, obviously, but it was great to totally put that school laptop aside and just kind of enjoy life for a while. Because we're back here doing this, that does mean we're getting close to the end of summer. That's kind of the whole point of this episode too. I know a lot of teachers listening to this might be, I don't know, back in their classrooms yet, but I know a lot of the country starts in August. We're a little bit after that. So we're all over the place. You're finished with your vacation. I'm about to go on my vacation. So it's kind of a hodgepodge here. And I think this episode is going to serve to put everything in its place, right? Because what we're really going to try to get into is refreshing yourself, refreshing your mindset towards EdTech. Part of that is going to be refreshing your mindset towards teaching and education in general. But of course, we're focusing on the EdTech piece because there's, it's a crazy world. Everything's changing a lot. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And I'm excited to let this episode sort of start to ease us back in to the year and hopefully ease our listeners back into the year as well.
Yeah, so really this episode is going to address three major questions here, and that's how we will be using EdTech this year. And kind of tied in with that is how is it different from years past. Then we'll get into what advice would we give new and experienced teachers regarding the use of EdTech this year. And then finally, what are some EdTech activities or tools that we're looking forward to use this year? Now, these are very broad questions. We'll get more specific as we go over them. I was looking at some of the stuff that you put in the show notes. I'm very excited to hear about what you have to say there. But before we get into the main gist of this episode, why don't we take a second, pause, and reflect on, the Teach Better podcasting network with our friends over at Teach Better.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
And we're back for the official main segment of the show here, where we talk about that EdTech mindset and how we plan on refreshing it. I love this topic. I was complimenting you before we started recording. I'm going to do it again. I think this is perfect for where our heads are at. And I'm just going to dive straight into the first question we posed ourselves, which is, how do you want to use EdTech this year, and how is it different than in the past? And we're doing this because I know for sure you and for sure me, and I think probably for a lot of people, a lot of teachers who are either in the EdTech world or just interested in using educational technology, it has been a transitional time. I think we're probably still in that time. I mean, it all started with COVID, and that was a total shakeup in that so many things went free, and then they were not free, even though we had all been using them for free. And then all of a sudden after that was AI, which was a huge shakeup. And I think it's got people just kind of rethinking how they want to be using it. I know I've been rethinking how I want to be using it, and what changes to make. So I think that's the kind of the heart and soul of this question. Do you want to kick it off with what you were thinking about as far as using EdTech?
Yeah, I mean, I do love the fact that you brought up all the AI stuff, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But with this first question, I'm just focusing on the amount of EdTech tools. One thing I realized last year is that teachers and students, they seemed a little burnt out with using technology from COVID. And last year was our first real year away from COVID and the, I guess how education changed during COVID. Most teachers came back to earth a little bit and did a little bit less ed tech and a little bit more, classroom-based activities and things like that. But for me personally, going back into the classroom, teaching, and what I'm going to try to get out as a common message is to reduce the number of ed tech tools that you use in the classroom. And that doesn't mean that you use ed tech any less. I'm just saying, try to find just a couple that you like to use, and that is more of the Swiss Army knife of ed tech tools. So, one of the ones that we always say is Canva. You could use that for many different things to be a part of many different activities in your classroom. So for me, I'm going to try to pick one that is creative based and allows them to come up with a project. I'm going to choose one that helps me, demonstrate a lesson or get the information out there. And then I'm going to choose one that quizzes them or helps form some type of formative assessment and allows me to get data on some of the misconceptions that they might have with the content. So for me, I'm going to stick to 3. And when we really think about it, if, for example, we have 8 possible class periods, and that means that the students could take 8 different classes throughout, our week. And if each one of those teachers have 3 tools that they're using, now the likelihood of some of them overlapping is there, but there's also a likelihood that some teachers might use more than that. And so 3 times 8, 3 ed tech tools times the 8 classes, that's 24 pieces of ed tech that they could be exposed to throughout the year. And that could be daunting for some kids, especially if they're not, technology centric, tech centric. That could be a lot of tools, and that could be a lot of added stress. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm going to get creative, use 3 different tools, and just get very creative on how I implement them in the classroom and how students use them. Now, before everyone comes at me and says, whoa, ed tech guy, limiting ed tech. I'm not going to limit ed tech. If students want to finish something in a program that they're comfortable with, I'm always down for that. I just tell them that I can't always guarantee success. If I don't know that tool, I'll help them out the best I can. But, they have to be comfortable with it and comfortable with the choice that they make. And most of the time, I'll let them go with it. So I'm going to just try to help limit technology burnout and just focus on a couple different tools.
Yep, that's a great message. We've been kind of saying that for a while, and it's a great time a great year to really embrace it. I'm glad you brought it up. And it's funny because your answer to that is pretty much the same as my answer to the next thing we're going to address. So we'll pretty much circle back to that same idea. For me, the thing that I want to try to embrace in EdTech this year is is sort of dealing with this problem of these tools that we do end up using, right? For you, those three main tools, whatever they are, or even those of us that are using many different tools, they change a lot. And when they change, right, if there's some update that goes through, if you're a Canva user, there was a fairly significant one, I would say, this summer of 2024. Maybe significant is too strong, but definitely like the visual of signing into your Canva homepage and then working on a design is different. And immediately I was like, yeah, I get it, fine. Like I'm sure I'll get used to this eventually. But immediately I was like, well, now all of the guides, the student use guides, the tutorials, whatever, videos, none of them apply anymore. And I got to go back and change those. And it annoys me because it's like the third time that I've had to do that for Canva specifically. And it just got me thinking about how I don't really want to do it anymore. So one thing that I'm going to try to do is use less of that type of thing, not try to create so many step-by-step specific guides for students. Like, okay, if you want to do, remove background, first click here and then click here and then click here, and have screen caps for each of those, because that's the kind of thing that you have to redo all the time. And who's got time for that? Certainly not educators. So instead I was thinking I could focus on other things, more like skills-based things that students can just know how to do when it comes to all technology. In other words, if I know that my kids are going to be using Canva a lot, I'll make sure that they have, or they know where, the Canva user guide is, or whatever they call it, Canva help pages, where that stuff is, so that they don't have to rely on my tutorials being updated. I don't have to update my tutorials. They can just go to Canva's own documentation, which is probably going to be updated much more quickly than mine when changes are made to those websites. So, that was just one of my ideas. Another thing would be just teaching them how to Google, teaching them good phrases to Google when it comes to tech help. Our friend and person we work with and person who's been on the show several times, Jeff Loesch, he always says that he doesn't really know more about technology than other people. He's just better at Googling to find answers than other people. And I mean, he certainly knows a lot more than most people. He's sort of selling himself short there, but the message is so true. He's just good at searching. He's good at finding stuff. He's good at not giving up when there's immediately a problem, which is what a lot of people and a lot of students do. So teaching students how to work through that process. And my favorite one, asking AI tools for help, because that's what we want students to be using AI for, right? It's not writing essays for them. It's going there for guidance as like a tutor almost. And I think that AI can serve that purpose as well. So that's my thing, man. I'm just tired of updating all my stuff, and I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to try to teach those skills to the kids instead.
So let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, credit where credit's due. Jeff Loesch officially wrote prompts before prompts were like a thing for AI.
He did.
He definitely knows how to write a Google prompt to make magic happen. So I do like that. I do like the fact that you are now leveraging AI to help them with other tools. And it could be with other AI tools. It could be, anything across the board. And what comes to mind, last year, I wanted to write Google script, and I didn't know how to do it.
Right.
And so I wrote Google script, but I used ChatGPT to help me do that. And basically it gave me a guide. I followed it step by step, and I was able to, successfully do what I wanted to do. So I do love all that. I think those are great conversation starters, at least are how we're using EdTech this year and how it's different from years past. I know that we always talk about our EdTech toolkit. I will still have mine, and yes, it would be more than 3 tools deep, but I think I'm just going to keep it to the ones that I kind of prescribe to students to use. And I don't like to prescribe anything. I always give them a fourth choice of come up with your own way of doing it, and it's perfectly fine. But, I want to stick to those 3, and then I'll have my, list of AI tools and other tools that I used for day in, day out processes as well. So that's a good start to the episode. Let's get into our next one. And what advice would you give to new and experienced teachers for using EdTech this year? I'm going to go ahead and let you start this one because I think your answer is a pretty good one to unpack first.
Yeah, well, this is, like I said, this is pretty much, in a different way of saying it, what you were getting at with your original response, sort of trimming down to those most important things. That's kind of what I'm saying. But I really want to make sure that for me now, and this is why I would tell this to new teachers or, people just getting into the tech world, make sure you are investing time in the tools that are likely to still be there down the road. We have just seen too many things come up and get big and popular, and then they go away, and you've invested all this time, and maybe you've moved over all these assessment questions to whatever tool you have chosen, and all of a sudden it's gone, it's sold, it's bought, it's absorbed by somebody else. It's just is totally shut down. Trying to stick to things that we know will be there because they've always been there. I'll throw out Canva again. I don't think Canva's going anywhere. If you're going to choose an online gaming platform, maybe like Quiz is something that's been there for a long time and is still at the, definitely innovating and constantly adding things, because that's what it's going to take to still be there in 5 years. So really think about what those tools are, what you're going to use. And if you're not sure what they are, go talk to your tech coaches or listen to a show like us. We mention them all the time. Just start to notice the names that are being brought up over and over again, like the Canvas, because they're the ones that will probably last. Because I hate to see when teachers put so much effort into something and then all of a sudden your school isn't paying for it anymore. And you're like, well, what am I going to do? It's just such a heartbreaker. And we have such little time as teachers that's just terrible. What made me think of this, of course, is the Flip thing. If you listen to our episode 169, it was all about replacers for Flip. It's called Flip, but a lot of teachers still know it as Flipgrid because, while it's not going away, if you are not Teams? Is that right?
Yeah, that's Teams.
Yeah, if you're not a Teams school, if you don't have access to Microsoft Teams, then you have lost access to Flip. So we had a couple staff members who came to us and were like, well, what now? And we kind of said, I don't know. We came up with some ideas, but none of them perfect. My point is, that's what I would like to avoid for as many new teachers as possible.
Yeah, so I think everything you said is well put. I mean, it's a great discussion for teachers to have, and that's to stick with time-tested tools and just keep rolling with them as they keep updating. And when they stop updating, they're going to go away. They have to evolve with the times, just like anything else. So I think that's a solid conversation starter. For me, even though I said that I wasn't really on technology over the summer, which is true, it doesn't mean I didn't stop thinking about technology. So the one thing that I've been thinking about is AI and how much it's changed over last year. I mean, last November, we really started to get into the AI tools and all that. So, we've been in it for almost a year now, but now we're going to have to start thinking about policy and how they're used in schools and in classrooms. And, there's some schools out there that probably don't have a policy and they're just leaving it up to the teachers, which is perfectly fine. But as teachers, we need to really think about how we're going to not only allow or not allow students to use AI, but prevention and, how we're going to have communication about AI and all the tools and things like that. So me personally, I know I'm going to put something in my syllabus about my AI policy, and I'm going to be open as to some of the things that I know about AI and just let them know that, there are ways that we can kind of, proofread, check, make sure that they're not abusing it in the wrong way. We might not be able to 100% determine whether or not they're using AI, but we could at least get a conversation that could allow us to get to the bottom of it. So for me, in my syllabus, I'm going to take a look at our school policies, going to remind them of those, and then I'm going to even take it another layer and give them my class policy and how we use AI in the classroom. So that's kind of where I'm going with this one. My biggest piece of advice is to find out, if you're a new teacher, find out what the policy is at your school, and then build upon that conversation with your students, in class, and also give them how you want them to use it, especially if the policies are very vague or, it's up to the teacher.
Yeah, you got to make sure the new teachers know that an AI statement in probably every single project, or maybe even every single assignment, needs to be made, just the same as you would say, I don't know, you can't use Wikipedia for more than one source on this page, whatever it is, right? All those types of things. AI is now that, and you gotta have it in there. Don't be afraid to, I think for me, the main thing this year is letting the students know that using AI, it's gonna make your life harder, because if it's caught, it's going to be more difficult for you. You're going to have to defend yourself, have conversations, redo the work that you could have just done yourself the first time anyway. Like, it's not paying off for you to do this, even though it seems like it does in that moment where that question gets answered and you're like, sweet, I'm done with this assignment in 5 minutes. Down the road, things will be much worse for you by taking those routes. So I love that you brought it up. AI policy is huge for everybody, not just the new teachers. And there's I don't want to go too far down that road, because there's about 1,000 things we could say there. I mean, we've done episodes on it. If you do want to sort of hear a deeper dive, recently we've done probably somewhere between 160 and now. I know there's at least a couple, or literally pick any educational podcast, because we're all talking about it. It's huge right now. But I love your approach, and I hope that's helpful to some people, just to kind of get them thinking in that way, that it's just this new thing that we all have to grapple with. And you need policies, man. Use your schools. And if your school doesn't have one, get on it for them. Help them out. Let them know they need it, or that they have to at least be prepared to support you when you implement kind of your own classroom level stuff. Am I right about that?
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I'll just throw out one suggestion that I would have. If you're going to have your students use AI and they're allowed to, don't just allow them to use it free reign. Kind of ask them to explain, what they used, what program, what the prompt is that they put in, and then have them copy and paste it at the end of the paper so you could see what they wrote versus what the AI wrote. And I think if you do little things like that, that really allows, students to be able to have the freedom to use it, but also it's not just hey, put in a prompt, submit that, and it's done. They actually have to show work. And for some of them, that's going to be a deterrent right there. So that's just one of the many ways that I kind of, leverage different steps and different, boundaries to get students to do more of their own work versus just solely use AI.
Yeah, and let's leave that one there, just because we could spend the next hour at least throwing ideas out there, and we'll get to our final thing. Let's also make this last question our EdTech Throwdown for this episode.
Welcome to the EdTech Throwdown. This is an in-episode competition featuring an EdTech tool, tip, or practice that can be used to enhance learning and increase engagement. In one corner, we have Geist, the genetically confused mixture of silverback, human, and sloth, a walking identity crisis. And in the other corner, we have Nick, the pint-sized powerhouse ready to punch above his weight and give Geist a run for his bananas. It's a showdown between a confused giant and a determined David. Get ready for the ultimate clash of the EdTech Titans.
We're talking about what EdTech tools we're going to try to use this year. And this is tricky because we spent a lot of this time talking about trimming down our EdTech tools, but here we go, throwing out more of them. I'm going to give you mine too first, if you don't mind. And the first one, I don't know. I'm not even sure how I feel about this, because if you ask me to defend it, I cannot, because I know nothing about it, but I'm choosing it because of where this tool comes from, and I have a hunch it's going to be good. But being honest right from the start, it is literally just a hunch. Talking about Khanmigo, Khanmigo. I have not used it. I have not joined. You can get a free teacher account, which I will be doing sometime within the next couple of weeks once I'm back from my vacation here. But Khanmigo is, as far as I understand it, sort of like an alternative to maybe the more well-known choice right now, Magic School AI, where a teacher can sign in and it's like a tailored AI for educators to do things like write lesson plans, whatever, you name it, it's all in there. Khanmigo is that for teachers. Why am I choosing this instead of Magic School AI? Just to be different, just because you had Magic School AI. So I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go with Khanmigo. Also, I just got an email about it a couple weeks ago, where I was like, I don't know, it just kind of appealed to me. So for me, it's Khanmigo. For students, it is School AI, which is an AI tutor. I think on certainly large scale, like lab reports and projects, I'm going to build a little tutoring room for students to go there and get help related to that project. It's so easy for me to set up, and I think that it's just a no-brainer. So School AI for the kids in my classes and Khanmigo for me are my two EdTech picks for today's episode.
I think they're solid, and I've heard of Khanmigo from, I think it was in beta when I first started hearing about it.
Yep.
But it's a solid one. So is School AI. They're both solid. I'm not going to say that they're not solid, but they're solid. All right. But for me, I'm kind of looking at ways that me as a teacher can start automating tasks. I don't want to lose any of the personalization and the feedback that I give students, but I want to make that process automated a little bit easier for myself. And what I'm saying here is I'm going to use two tools in a mashup, and then based on that mashup, I think it's just going to make my life a lot easier, and it's also going to make students' lives a lot easier because they're going to get more quality feedback. So what I'm going to use is Magic School AI, which you already alluded to. And I'm also going to use TextBlaze, which is an AI tool that I really, really love that I've talked about before. But what I was trying to do is find ways that I could give students feedback that is close to as instant as I possibly can. And some of these are hard to do. We teach a podcasting course. I got to listen to that. So it's not going to be instant, but this will make it easier for us to grade these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Magic School AI's rubric generator, and I'm going to generate a rubric that will fit whatever the theme is for that podcast episode. So all the students, they pick their own topic, they pick their own title, they write their own show notes and all that. But throughout this process, we make them, choose an episode where they have to do an interview. So we could have a rubric based on the quality of their podcast, and that one is found in every single one of their podcasts. But then we could have a rubric that's also based on the skill that we're introducing for that podcast, such as that interview. So go into Magic School, you give some of the parameters, like what the categories are as to what you want on the rubric, and it will automatically generate that rubric. All right, there's a little copy button there that you could use. And then you could paste that into TextBlaze. Now, TextBlaze is really cool. So if you picture any text box that you have, whether it's an email, if you're in a Gmail writing a message, whether it's a Google Forms blank or anything like that. Anywhere where there's a blank that you could copy and paste text in, you could use TextBlaze to make these templates. And you basically give it its own URL ending. So for mine, it would be podcast rubric. And I would just, while the extension that TextBlaze is on, I would just type in rubric, podcast rubric, and it will copy and paste that podcast in there. So if I go to our LMS, I can easily just hit /podcast rubric, and it's going to bring in that rubric into our LMS, and I can grade it right in there as I'm listening to it. So before this, Nick and I had to listen to the podcast and kind of take notes on a piece of scratch paper and then take those comments and put it into the LMS. But now, because we have a rubric, we can kind of highlight each section in that rubric and then give a couple of personalized feedback things. It doesn't seem like it's saving us a lot of time, but being able just to highlight a rubric and just give them a positive and maybe something to improve on will save a lot of time for us. So I'm going to mash up Magic School A rubric generator with TextBlaze. And that way, anytime I want to leave that feedback based on that rubric, I could easily do that just by typing in the little shortcut.
I love it. TextBlaze is always a winner for me. I don't know. I can't say that tool is going to be around for a long time because it's, at least to us, it's pretty new. I don't know the longevity of that guy, but boy, I think it's worth it anyway. If you haven't checked out TextBlaze as a Chrome extension for yourself, get in there. It's just such a huge time saver. Even if it did go away in 2 years, I would be happy that I had it for the amount of time that it existed, just because of how easy it makes that template process that you can just pop that text anywhere. So I love that you brought it up. I like that we basically put Magic School AI against Conmigo here. And, I think we've given people some good stuff to think about. I know that I feel refreshed and ready to go after today's episode. How you feeling?
I feel really good. And to be honest with you, this episode is what I needed to really, start getting excited about this new school year. I'm not going to lie. I've been on education hiatus, but I think this week I'm going to start getting into, prepping myself for the new school year. And you know what? I'm actually looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Except weirdly enough, I'm doing this now, thinking about all these things. I leave for my family vacation in 2 days. So I got to go back on non-teaching mode and then come back and really hit the ground running. So it's going to be a weird next couple of weeks for me. But it doesn't matter because this is a great episode to at least help dip our toes in the water. I think that also wraps it up for episode 170. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the EdTech Throwdown. Do us a couple of favors. Subscribe to our podcast on any major podcast catcher such as Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and Stitcher. Go over to YouTube, search the EdTech Throwdown, subscribe to the channel. You can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. The show's handle is EdTech Throwdown. You can connect with Geis at GeisGotTech, Nick at NickGotTech. You can write us an Apple Podcast review. You can tell your friends about www.edtechthrowdown.com. And lastly, go over and check out our friends over at the Teach Better Podcast Network, a network that we are so proudly involved with. Until next time, remember, go try some EdTech because we will do the research so you can teach your class.